Welcome to the CMO Chapter podcast, where we dive deep into the dynamic world of Chief Marketing Officers. Join us as we explore the careers, insights, and strategies of top marketing executives who shape the brands we know and love. Whether you're a seasoned marketer, aspiring CMO, or simply just curious to understand what it really takes to step into the shoes of a CMO. This podcast is your backstage pass to discovering what it's like to really lead and innovate in the ever-evolving landscape of business. Stay tuned as we uncover the stories of the visionaries behind the brand. So today I'm joined by the lovely Nicola Clement. Welcome. Series 1, Episode 1 to the CMO Career Chapters podcast. I've known Nicola now, it feels like longer, but I think it's been maybe about a year or so approximately. When I first spoke to Nicola about this episode, the main focus that we really wanted to get out of this real, discussion was more around, what we can put together and really getting Nicola's thoughts around supporting the next generation of marketing leaders that are coming up. What are the do's? What are the don'ts? What are the go-tos? And a big one, what are the learnings? I speak to a lot of individuals a lot that want to one day get to the top spot, but I think we've also got to sometimes ask ourselves, is it also, is it really the right move, or are we doing it mainly for financial reasons? So yeah, lots to talk about. So I'm going to start by saying, Nicola, welcome. And do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited. This is definitely one of my passion projects, helping people with careers. But yes, hi everyone. I'm Nicola Clement. I am currently the Chief Experience Officer at Adore Beauty. I have worked in digital and retail for over 23 years. My most recent job before Adore was the General Manager of Omni Experience at Myer, also looking after all things online and e-commerce and working back with store experience. I've also worked for Jetstar, led the transformation program, Smiggle for revenue, Kathmandu, Quicksilver, quite a few names to rattle off there. But yes, you could say I've been around the traps for a while.
Yeah, I think you've certainly have. You've been there and seen it all at some point, I'm sure.
I have a few battle scars to show for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess the question I've got, and I'm really curious, I feel like I've got to know you quite a lot over the last, few months, certainly going back and forth. I feel, from my perspective, from an outsider looking in, I would say for me, I look at you and I go, have you always been that high achiever? Have you been someone that's always known, I want to be here and this is how I'm going to do it and this is what I'm going to go for and this is my goal? Or has it been something that over time you've just comfortably got confident and been able to certainly just tap into knowing what you're good at and strive for those opportunities?
That's a really good question. I think it comes back to a lot around how I even coach other people when I'm talking about careers. I I've always been a high achiever. Yes,
Yeah.
there's a bit of family dynamics there as well. And it might be a whole different podcast for another time. But I actually rode for New Zealand under 19s. I did quite well at school. And the key thing for me was just I like to go and do things that were interesting for me. I actually did
Right.
a Bachelor of Science in zoology, ended up doing a 1-year postgrad in marketing and commerce, and did my first job. My boss turned around and said, IT is doing something called the internet. Can you go downstairs and find out from marketing? So what I do for a job didn't actually exist when I
Yeah.
went to university. I fell into it, but for me, it was that feeling that it was both left brain and right brain. There was a
Yeah.
science aspect to it. Even before there was a concept of A/B split testing, I'm like, this is just like coming up with a scientific hypothesis. I can test something, validate it with data, and then course correct or implement what I've learnt. Um, Creative psychology and human behavior aspect to it. And I found that real combination of both just made my brain sparkle. So I was always curious and I kind of chased that problem solving high. And I guess that's been one of the key driving forces behind what I've done with my career. But the other thing for me is that maybe a few years into it, I really had that sort of vision for what I wanted to do longer term. And that was being able to have a wider impact. I felt like there was systemic challenges across the industry. There was a lack of customer centricity, a lack of efficiencies, and using technology to improve not only commercial outcomes but also customer outcomes. So I always had that drive as well because there was a lot of females in senior positions that I wanted to be on boards. I wanted to have a broader impact. And I used to like imagine if I'm going to have those interviews where I'm going for boards, like what's the thing that's going to help make me stand out? Or even if I'm putting across my 2-page CV, what are the types of things that are going to grab their attention that might get me on a shortlist? Because generally, when I get in the door, I have a conversation with someone. I'm great. So a lot of key decisions for me around the roles that I took and
Hmm.
as I worked for, I was like, does that add to my story? I'm generally much of a storyteller, but how can I weave that and does that story make sense if in 5, 10 years I'm picked to a chairperson of the board, why they should hire me?
Yeah, I think you make a really valid point because, I look at your career, you've worked for some really top tier brands, different industries as well to a degree. And there's been some significant projects, and transformations that you've been across throughout those. I'm curious to know from a leadership perspective, you're a leader now, you've previously managed, big teams, etc. But from your learnings throughout your career, as you were sort of making your way up to, I guess, where you are now, CXO, has there been leaders that you've been able to say, "You know what, I learn a lot from you," and, really sort of helped you become, I guess, the leader that you are now? Or honestly, has it been more so down to you knowing how best to sort of, you perhaps have been treated really well or not so well by a leader and going, "Right, well, I don't wanna be that person in the future."
I think the actual foundations of that for me came from my rowing days, to be honest. That real
Really?
teamwork construct, 8 people, 9 people from and the coxswain in a boat, getting up early, committing to each other, turning up for each other, and being that real core team function is what gave me the construct and dynamic of what I wanted to be able to achieve. And so the hierarchy thing has never been as important to me.
Mm,
But I guess the real lessons of I've been learning the hard way from bosses that showed me what not to do and how I didn't want to show up for others. And I am sad to say that out of those managers that have been the most challenging for me in my career have actually been female. So
yeah,
um, that's been a difficult challenge. But especially my boss that I had at Jetstar and my boss that I had at Myer were really supportive and more than anything gave me space to shine,
yeah,
allowed me to present my own work, coached me through how to put together the presentations. And the key thing for me was those soft skills and being able to actually pitch in for funding, get resources, and do that for myself because I spent most of my career as the most experienced person in an organization in my subject matter expertise. I came
yeah.
into digital in early 2001. So most of my career, like I've grown up as the internet has grown up, right? So um, my bosses have sometimes struggled with the fact that they didn't understand what I do. But the ones that embraced that, let me shine, and helped me with the things that I didn't know how to do, they were the
Mhm.
best supporters, and I'm very grateful to them, for helping me with that.
Yeah. I think you mentioned something there that's a really valid point, and as a recruiter, something that I hear a lot, which is, you know, nowadays, yes, there's lots of restructures and, people are leaving roles, especially in the retail environment, as we're seeing, it's massively, turbulent. But it's a case whereby, people do leave bad leaders and bad managers. And, I, back in the day, years ago, experienced really bad leadership myself. And, you know what you don't want and you know what you do want. And I think you've made a really valid point around knowing that you've had leaders that have allowed you to shine and actually, have really given you space to breathe. And you've done some incredible, stuff, especially across Maya. I think you got the revenue up to about 850 million, which is, yeah, no easy feat. In terms of, I guess, if you were talking to leaders, or it could be that they're, I don't know, senior managers within marketing at the moment, what would you say, if they've got their eyes set on the CMO or CXO route, or they want to be on that C suite? Is there any particular sort of mental formula you've really got to have to be able to be that, that individual?
I think that the key thing that's changed for me is that mindset where people thought it's a ladder. They keep talking about you need to take a step up, and I
Yeah.
have to realize in this day and age is that the world is a lot more complex, and the things that you must know or be able to manage in a CMO or CXO role
Mhm.
these days, particularly in retail, is very vast. The You're not really going to be able to progress constantly upwards and be able
Yeah.
to get all of those skills in a vertical way. It is really important to actually look at what is that entire skill set that is required of a
Mm,
CMO in today's age, and also realize that not all CMO roles are equal,
no.
both in terms of responsibilities, in terms of pay, and in terms of seniority. So, for example, when I was a general manager at Myer, I got it to just shy of 800 million. And that was from 240 million over nearly 4 years. But I was managing
Wow.
a team of 70 people and a significant budget, of which that budget size, the team size, and the revenue I was accountable for is significantly greater, yet I now have a higher title. So
Yeah.
it's also one of those things that I learned over time that I became self-conscious about some of those things,
Mm,
and I wasn't so much an ego piece around not having a C suite title, but it was the fear that people wouldn't take me seriously without that C suite title. And it was actually through talking to a couple of recruiters who actually reassured me that they understood enough about retail and what was going on, that they knew that the type of complexity of organization, the size of the team, the budgets, and everything that I managed didn't matter that I didn't have a C suite um, level title, that the job that I was doing was definitely already C suite and potentially even more significant than a number of other C suite roles that were in the market already. So that really helped shift my perspective. But that real piece for me, whether it's marketing, digital, anything like that, you're going to have to look at the skills and understand, do you put your hand up for something new, volunteer for a project that's outside of your current remit? Do you take a sideways step? Do you potentially have to move to a smaller company in order to get more of that experience before you can step up? There's a lot
Yeah.
of different things to consider in how you actually put that journey together. But it is
Yeah.
your journey, and it is your one to build based on where you want to go long term. So my other advice is have your eye on the horizon. Where is that place you are trying to get to long term? And are these decisions helping you get towards that, even though they don't necessarily feel linear? As long as that story is adding up to your end goal and it makes sense to you, then that's what matters, not what anybody else thinks.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that actually, what you've just said. I think it's your journey, it's so individual. And I think I certainly have conversations with, say more junior marketers that I can see the hunger and the ambition and they want it. But to a degree nowadays, with the cost of living going up, everyone's talking about money. And they're talking about they want to get to that 250, 300, the big six-figure salaries. And that's great. And I say to people, brilliant, go for it. But at the end of the day, when you're in that, remit, the fact of the matter is right now, you're probably managing a big team potentially, but not everyone's going to be good at that, and really when they get to that, do they even want it?
That is a really, really valid point and something that again I like to try and coach people through, because
Yeah.
there's a generalist and a manager level type of career, but you can also be a specialist. And it's okay to put your hand up and say, hey, managing people is not my thing, or give it a go and then be like, no, you know what? I prefer to be on the tools. I like being a subject matter expert or a specialist in certain
Mm,
things, and you will be able to find roles that enable you to do that. Or there's consulting and contracting and a number of other different ways of looking at that. But I also think that there is a bit of the grass is always greener, maybe is the right
yeah.
saying, when it comes to what people's views of what jobs look like as you move higher up the chain. my personal experience is that the work that I enjoy when I actually get my hands in the data and the tools I get to create, I don't get to do that very often anymore.
Yeah.
And there is a lot more admin, there is a lot more politics, having to like sell my vision in, convince everybody else, take them on the journey. Like I know it's important, but like I would much rather like, here's some money, go do what you need to do and deliver great things. But that's not the reality of how the world works. But also, when you hire brilliant, driven people who are constantly chomping at your heels, it's a manager's responsibility to get out of their way and give them room to grow and shine, which usually means that I'm constantly carving off parts of my role, projects back to them and supporting them to grow. But that does mean that I then have to go, "Oh, I don't get to do that anymore. I've just got to coach them through it." So I also think it's important that as you get to the top, realizing that there is a balance. That is the reality of the job, and your responsibility as a manager to keep your team employed and doing great work. But do try and find passion projects that you can still own or work with your team on so you get your hands dirty from time to time because you also don't want to um, lose touch.
Yeah. And you're right. And I think that's a nice little segue, I guess, into my I'm actually more curious to ask you this to sort of get your insights on this one. But we've all been talking about AI over the last God knows how long. It's the topic on everyone's mind for various different reasons. But I guess I'm curious to know, from a business perspective, when we're looking at, I guess, that C-suite or, GM level or what it is, everyone's learning this at the same point. None of us are experts in this right now to a degree. Some might think they're more so than others or a bit more ahead of the curve. How much of a part do you think AI is going to have to play in terms of, I guess, in the future, when you look at a team structure, do you feel like there's going to be someone that's going to be the AI go to and they're the specialist within that? Or, I'm just curious to get your view on that.
Oh, AI is definitely one of my pet peeve subjects at the moment for multiple reasons. The first thing is that actually AI in terms of machine learning was apparently first developed by a female in the 1800s. We have Alan Turing who created the first computer in the
Um,
1950s. We had IBM Watson building a computer that could beat a human at chess in the 1980s. As retailers, we've had AI and our fraud protection
uh,
tools for well over a decade. There is AI, like even in Myer and Adore Beauty, across so many things that we were already doing. It's only really now that it's crossed the chasm in terms of adoption, and that we've got those sorts of tools that are now readily usable by a general layperson off the street, that all
uh,
of a sudden it's kind of boomed and become far more accessible. So there is this whole narrative around AI that does grind my gears a little bit. Important to realize it's not new, it's
uh,
just that it's now accessible and can be utilized by a general population, which is
uh,
great. My other key challenges is that everyone keeps going on like, "What's your AI strategy?" I'm like, "No, no. What's your business strategy,
yeah.
your customer strategy, and how can AI help you deliver on that?" And there is some challenges around for me, magpie syndrome, chasing the shiny
Yeah.
objects. And I'm always a big fan of with ever anything I do, and my team, I'm like, you need to focus on the problem or the opportunity, not
Uh-huh.
the solution. So if you come at it from, we've got a problem around efficiencies, or we've got things that are being done manually that are creating human risk and errors, anything like that, or it's taking too long, we can't get things up fast enough for products that are coming into the warehouse, we can't get them online quickly enough.
Okay.
Right. Well, what technology could I use to do that? Now, sometimes that's automation. It's
Uh,
not a There are so many different types of AI now, whether or not it's machine learning, it's large language models, it's robotic process automation, those kind of things, that it's so easy to just go down a rabbit hole and not actually think about why you were putting something in. And then there's a whole conversation, probably a whole podcast in itself, around build versus buy. And should you build your own models? Should you be building your own internal AI capability? I'm a firm believer that AI should be democratized. It should be something that is utilized across the entire business, and everybody should be able to think about just how can I operate more effectively and efficiently
Mm,
in the role and reduce risk while also bring great customer and commercial outcomes.
yeah.
AI is a great enabler of that. It is a tool. And the best thing I can recommend to anybody who is interested in AI, I did MIT's AI strategy course. Best thing. I've done a couple of other AI things since. It was the best one that I've done because it's
Brilliant.
about applying AI strategy and understanding some of the key concepts. But that's as business managers and like C suites that we need to know.
Yeah, and thank you. I remember years ago, and it's very different here, but I mean, I've been recruiting now nearly 20 years, and I remember back in the day, people would, when apps first became a thing. I know AI is a little bit different to apps, but it was like everybody, it was the magpie syndrome, as you said. Everyone was like, "We need an app, we need an app." It was the thing, and I think now it's like AI, we've got to get across it, but it's using it in the best possible smart way that's going to benefit the business without overcomplicating it and making it unsustainable. I think that's going to be key.
And not a distraction at the moment. Like we're talking about, from my perspective, this is the first time in my entire career, like in the last sort of 18 months post COVID, where stores have been more profitable than online. We've
Yeah.
had significant cost challenges. The course that I was running on e-commerce profitability optimization, those sorts of things, watching every dollar is really important. But that also means that the foundations of retailing, marketing, and online have never been more important. And so when you start to get distracted and you're not doing it to solve a core business problem that you have prioritized,
Mhm.
and you're spending time and effort on the wrong thing, and you're potentially introducing cost for something that your customer does not want or need. And
Yeah.
there's a tension between that. So again, it's just a different way of thinking about how to prioritize.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit more about personal branding. I've observed over the years, it sounds a bit stalkerish, but observed you've been on panels, you've been on boards, you've been a judge. Have those opportunities, have you volunteered for those? I mean, how would you, I guess, if someone was saying, well, I want to get more involved, but, I don't have the confidence or, oh, I don't know where to start, but I really want to focus on growing my personal brand. What would your advice be?
Oh, big question. I think the key thing for me in terms of how I got into those sorts of things, I've just always shown up as myself. I
Mm,
had found early on in my career that I was holding back. I was being polite. I was brought up in a speak only when you're spoken to kind of respect your elders kind of thing. And I ended up sort of finding my voice a little bit more, and I decided that I would much rather show up as me, and have the people around me who enjoyed that authenticity. And it's been really important for me. That's how I show up in person when I talk to people. It's how I'm showing
mm,
up today. It's how I
yeah,
show up on LinkedIn. Like my war stories are my war stories. And even though I talk to my team, I'm like, ask me an open question, I will give you a straight answer.
yeah,
I think that actually has quite resonated with people. So it wasn't a conscious decision around personal brand. I think for me, it was just being authentically showing up, understanding my values, integrity, and not being afraid to show that to people.
yeah.
And then naturally seemed to lend itself to people going, hey, she's saying some things that other people aren't prepared to say. Which
Mm,
people are giving us great feedback that they're enjoying this content. Let's, get her in to have a chat. And I just said yes to things, mostly because I didn't see somebody like me up there having these conversations. There was a lot of the same old guys always doing the talking. And a number of times I showed up to conferences and I'd actually get really grumpy because I was like, I can run circles around you. I
yeah,
know about what you're talking about, and you're up there, and actually that's wrong. And I was getting really aggravated. So when somebody asked me, I'm like, yes, I didn't chase those opportunities. I'm grateful that I had those opportunities presented to me. And for anybody who is wanting to show up and be more engaged in those things, the best option first is panels. Panels are a great way of being able to just have more of a conversation.
Mhm.
That's again a lot easier, especially if you're not great at being in front of people and get nervous around that. But like Shop Talk, for example, which Lisa Powell runs from e-com and digital perspective in Sydney, Brisbane, and Melbourne, they are great informal events. They do not have media. There's no cameras. You're not recorded. It's a safe space, and it's your peers asking you questions. Another great opportunity to be involved there. And I think it's building a bit of confidence about that, but
Yeah.
also recognizing that nobody really knows how to do this. It's kind of
Mm.
a thing that comes with practice. But I also find that when I show up for me as an individual, sometimes, especially in a room full of people I don't know, I can be a little bit more nervous. But when I'm talking about my work, I'm good at my job and I know my numbers and like I have absolutely no problem. I relish the opportunity to help people learn what I've had to learn the hard way. If I can help give them some more information that allows them to be better at their careers and make better outcomes for us as an industry, um,
Mhm.
th- that's a win-win. And that's what drives me. And I think that passion overcomes any of my original fears or concerns around showing up in those places.
Yeah. You know what? I absolutely love how open you've just been there because I think confidence is a massive factor, especially I'm going to say for women. I mean, look, not saying men don't suffer from confidence issues, like we all do at some point. Of course we do. But, I'll put my hand up for there and say, absolutely. It's been something that, you've had to stick your neck out and launch your own business. Now do a podcast. Who would have thought I'd be doing that 20 years ago? But here we are. So it's, you just sometimes got to throw yourself into it. I want to talk about how you manage, I guess, pressure and stress because every time I speak to you, you're either, I don't know, doing something. I mean, yeah, you're in Oxford or you're in the UK, or well, you are in the UK, but you're in Oxford, or you're in LA, or you're here, there, everywhere. You've got so many different, elements happening all at once. And then I do understand that you're also about to run half a marathon as well. So, how do you manage how do you manage all of that?
Look, I'll be the first one to say that it's been a lifelong journey to try and figure out how to better manage stress. Uh, have not always been very good at that, and I still have my days when I'm not. And first of all, I think it's good to be able to say that.
Mm,
What can appear on the outside versus the reality inside can be very different. The other thing I would say is that's being completely honest and showing up as my authentic self. There's also a difference for me between stress and anxiety.
yeah,
And I have recently found that I suffer more from anxiety than I fully understood. Um, and that actually came to the forefront from one of my previous jobs, the Sunday scaries and then
yeah,
Monday reporting and having to be in at 7 and that kind of pressure and um, like on top of us to perform and help get our manager up to speed on things. That has been a harder thing to solve for. But I think the most important thing that I've started over the last couple of years, when I decided to take the plunge and resign from Myer and leave an amazing team
mm,
and a company that I was very passionate about, and we'd done such great work, but so much great work still to come. Um, that in order to be able to go to Oxford and chase that long journey line to do my master's, the key thing I did is that I stopped for a second and I was like, okay, this is gonna take a lot out of me, but
mm,
when was the last time that I can remember that I had to do a lot of very important things and that I was the most efficient in my life and that I felt most on top of things. And
mhm,
funnily enough, the last time I did that was actually when I was 18. I was completing my last year at high school. I was rowing competitively at a national level and then got selected for the New Zealand under 19 teams. And we went to
wow,
Sydney for an international competition. And what I recognized in that is that actually being busy, but being very structured, helped me manage that. So I got this concept that I now refer to as time budgeting, not time management. I think about, well, how much time am I prepared to invest in certain things in order to achieve these outcomes that I want? So even when it comes to my assignments at uni. Like I got distinctions for my first few papers and proved that I could. But what I very much got to was this realization that I could spend 10 days on an assignment and get a distinction, or I could spend 2 days on an assignment and pass it. And then I could still catch up with my friends and
Yep.
I still do run my half marathon, or I could still jump home to New Zealand for a weekend, those kind of things. I realized that balance is far more important for me from a mental health perspective
Mhm.
than running, because the hormones that you get from running, the exercise, the focus that I get from doing
Mm.
that in a routine, and then also the achievement that I feel based in my health. I've lost some weight. Like I'm running 15 kilometers this weekend. Like that's
Amazing.
really good. And this will be the third time that I've attempted doing a half marathon. So I'm really looking forward to achieving that. So there's a few things there, but balance has been the best thing. And obviously my post-it note wall behind me is how I help my life.
I love it. Well, as they say, third time lucky, hey, with the half marathon. So, yeah, good luck. I love it. Finally, one question. And I guess, yeah, I'm just really curious to sort of know. And somebody else actually advised me, said this could be a really good question for your podcast. I thought, right, you know what? I'm going to ask this. If you could reflect back and you sort of look at, say, I don't know, your 28-year-old self, is there any sort of advice now where you are here? Is there any advice that you would give that person going back and sort of say, is there anything that you've learned now where you go, you know what, 28, I was so worried about this and I was thinking more about this, whereas actually then the main focus really should be on here and here. Is there any kind of advice or someone that could relate?
There's a couple of things that come to mind when you ask that question. The first one for me is probably not to feel like I needed to rush things so much. Like I was very much attached to that title and getting that responsibility and climbing that ladder. I think the perspective that I have now around the roles and the titles and what responsibility can look like that's different in companies and how you build out that like portfolio type of career. That's one thing. So I would sort of suggest to myself to just take a little bit of hill and make the decisions that are right for me, not to jump out of the frying pan and into the fire. Because
Mm,
there's definitely been those times where I have been like, I just wanted to quit. I wanted to get out
um,
rather than waiting for the right opportunity. Um, I have learnt to do that and I have been much better in my later career. But there was definitely one role that I had originally said no to and they talked me into it. And that was because I needed something to go on to. And I realized that I had stuck to my original instinct. So I think that's really important. But the second thing for me is that there is that really strange shift that you get to at a certain pivot point in your career where you've spent all of your time and energy becoming the best digital marketing person you can be. You know it all, you can do it
yeah.
all when you jump up a layer, you no longer do. You are being the subject matter expert is actually going to be more of a pain or a hindrance for you because
Mm,
you actually now need to lead people and coach them, and your soft skills are so much more important. And I feel you don't really help people understand those soft skills, leadership skills, how to do budgets, how to sell in business cases, ask for resources and demonstrate how to do those sorts of things that are important to be able to move up, but also to grow the businesses that you're working for. And there almost is that kind of like shift in identity as people try and make that transition, and not
yeah.
we will.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important thing is actually realizing that being well rounded, if you want to be a senior manager, is really important. And I think that I wish that I had understood the importance of soft skills earlier in my career.
Mm, mm. It's funny, as I've asked you that question, I've almost reflected on myself and gone, okay, well, what would I, even think about? And, now I'm in this position where I am. I think for me, and it's really interesting, is not caring as much about what other people think.
Yes.
For a long time, I cared so much about opinions and what other people thought. And maybe that just comes with hitting the mid-40 mark. I don't know. But you get to a point where it's like, so what? Just be yourself. And I think being, as you've mentioned quite a few times, being so authentic, it speaks volumes, especially in this industry. Well, any industry, let's be honest.
Completely agree.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you so much for your time. I've actually really enjoyed this whole entire conversation. So I really, really appreciate you just being so candid with me and really open. It's been really fantastic.
There was one question, though, that you had on your list that I wouldn't mind quickly talking about. You asked about books and things like that, and I actually have two that I put by the computer to show you. So I highly recommend Radical Candor by Kim Scott. This is definitely around how to be able to give and receive feedback, but also around psychological safety, which I think is so important as a leader. And then, as part of my university course this year, I went to Mexico City to learn about building and leading conscious enterprises, which is around how you can do well by all stakeholders in your company. So, yes, you can do well for investors, but you can do well for the environment and for your employees and your customers. So, this book here is called Sharp Key Leadership, which is
Brilliant.
based on feminine and masculine power in business. I mean, it's a much better read once you get into it, but for me, it is a little bit like turning up as your whole self. But also, I think there's been a real challenge for females in business where we kind of get rewarded from very masculine behaviors. And this is allowing us to be able to show up with, as our whole selves, yin and yang.
Yeah.
That sort of kind of concept. But it's also great for men to be able to have a look at and think about how can I also look at the other side of their personalities as well. So
Mm,
a couple of gems that I found that are
love it.
look at.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Because, yeah, I know that for one, I'm definitely going to look into those 100%. And I'm sure there's going to be others that are going to be Googling these books and they're going to be on order. I've got no doubt. You should have shares in this, Nicola. Well, look, thank you again for I really appreciate, as I said, the time and again, being so candid and vulnerable and open. I think if anything, really, it's been really great. I think there's definitely a lot there that's going to resonate with the audience, which, the whole point of this, as I said earlier, it's about being able to sort of, when we reflect and look at ourselves and go, okay, well, where to from here? We're not all perfect. And sometimes it's hard, especially in the market right now where everyone's under so much pressure to strive and earn more money. It's about being able to sort of stop and kind of recalibrate and really sort of get perspective about what's important.
Agree. And the other thing I would just add is that the same way that we say don't believe everything you see on social media, it's the same thing for LinkedIn. You can look
Yeah.
at my LinkedIn career, and everything on there and go, oh, wow, she's had an amazing career and it looks like it all fell into place. Well,
Yeah.
there's a whole other story underneath that is the battle scars and the decisions I could have changed, but I wouldn't be where I am today without them. And
Mm,
if anyone's got any other questions that they want to ask me directly or want to put in the comments from this post, then I'm more than happy to follow up and respond to any of those as well.
love it. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Remember, the road to CMO isn't always linear. It's filled with challenges, decisions, and moments of transformation. Whether you're charting your course or navigating a career shift, the experiences, wisdom shared today, as with our guests, is invaluable. Thank you for joining us. Keep dreaming big, keep pushing boundaries, and remember that your journey towards becoming a CMO is as much about the destination as it is about the growth you experience along the way. Until next time, continue to innovate, evolve, and carve out your path to CMO.